The morning of King Charles III's coronation dawned gray and drizzly over London, but inside Westminster Abbey the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Prince William stood in the anteroom, adjusting his ceremonial robes for what felt like the 100th time. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed the rich fabric, not from nerves about the ceremony itself, but from the weight of what this day truly meant. Catherine approached him quietly, her own coronation attire immaculate despite the early hour. She noticed the tension in his shoulders immediately. After 15 years together, she could read his moods like a favorite book. Without saying a word, she placed her hand on his arm, offering the silent support that had carried him through countless royal duties. "The children are asking for you," she whispered, gesturing toward the adjacent room where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis waited with their nanny. William's face softened instantly at the mention of his children. No matter how grand the occasion or how heavy the crown's responsibility felt, his role as a father always came first. He found them seated on ornate chairs that seemed far too large for their small frames. George, now 10 years old, wore his page uniform with the seriousness of someone who understood the gravity of the day. Charlotte, 8, fidgeted with the hem of her dress, while 5-year-old Louis swung his legs cheerfully, blissfully unaware of the historical significance surrounding him. "Papa, will Grandpa really be the king after today?" Charlotte asked, her young voice filled with curiosity rather than ceremony. William knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. The question hit him harder than he expected. His father, who had waited 74 years for this moment, would finally receive the crown that had been his destiny since birth. "Yes, sweetheart. Today, Grandpa becomes King Charles, just like his mother was Queen Elizabeth before him." William's voice caught slightly as he mentioned his grandmother. Even now, months after her passing, the grief felt fresh. Elizabeth II had been more than a monarch to him. She had been an anchor, a source of wisdom, and the steady presence that guided the royal family through decades of change. The children seemed to sense something deeper in their father's words. George, mature beyond his years, reached out and took his father's hand. "Are you sad, Papa?" he asked with the directness that only children possess. William squeezed his son's hand gently, marveling at how this young boy would one day face his own coronation, carrying forward a tradition that stretched back over 1,000 years. "Not sad, George. Just remembering." William struggled to find words that would make sense to his children. How could he explain the complex emotions swirling within him? Pride for his father's long-awaited moment, grief for his grandmother's absence, and the overwhelming realization that he was now one step closer to wearing the crown himself. A gentle knock interrupted the family moment. An aide appeared in the doorway, announcing that the procession would begin in 30 minutes. The children were escorted to their seats in the abbey, leaving William alone with his thoughts once more. He walked to the window, gazing out at the thousands of people lining the streets of London, all gathered to witness history unfold. The crowds reminded him of another coronation he had watched as a child, his grandmother's Jubilee celebrations. He remembered holding his father's hand then, just as George had held his moments ago. The circle of monarchy continued, each generation preparing the next for the enormous responsibility of serving the British people. His mind wandered to private conversations he had shared with his grandmother in her final years. Elizabeth II had spoken often about duty, about the sacrifices required of those who wear the crown. "The monarchy is bigger than any one person, William," she had told him during one of their last tea times together at Balmoral. "We are custodians of something precious, something that belongs to the people as much as it belongs to us." Those words echoed in his mind now as he prepared to watch his father accept that custodianship formally. Charles had dedicated his entire life to preparing for this day, championing causes from environmental conservation to architectural preservation. always knowing that his greatest role lay ahead of him. A flash of movement in the courtyard below caught William's attention. His father emerged from a car, resplendent in his coronation robes, but moving with the measured steps of someone who understood the magnitude of the moment. Even from this distance, William could see the emotion on his father's face, a mixture of solemnity, pride, and perhaps a touch of the same overwhelming feeling that William himself was experiencing. Catherine returned to his side, now ready for the ceremony that would change their family forever. "The children are settled," she reported, then studied her husband's face with concern. "How are you holding up?" William turned from the window, meeting his wife's gaze. In her eyes he saw understanding, love, and the strength that had made her such an invaluable partner in royal life. "I keep thinking about what this means," he admitted. "Not just for Father, but for all of us. For George, for Charlotte, for Louis. Everything changes today." "Everything and nothing," Catherine replied wisely. "Your father will be king, yes, but he's still the same man who taught you to fish at Balmoral, who walked you to school on your first day, who held you when your mother died. The crown doesn't change who he is at heart." Her words provided the comfort William needed. She was right, of course. Beneath all the ceremony and tradition, this was still his family. His father would wear the crown, but he would remain the man who had raised William with love, patience, and an unwavering sense of duty. The sound of the Abbey organ drifted through the ancient stones, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. William took a deep breath, straightening his shoulders and lifting his chin in the gesture that photographers had captured thousands of times. But this time, it wasn't for the cameras. It was for himself. A moment of gathering strength for what lay ahead. As they prepared to take their places in the Abbey, William felt a profound connection to all the generations of his family who had participated in similar ceremonies. His great-grandfather, George VI, his grandmother, Elizabeth II, and now his father, Charles III, each had stood where he stood, feeling the weight of history and the hope of the future. The doors to the Abbey opened before them, revealing the magnificent interior filled with world leaders, family members, and representatives of the Commonwealth realms. The moment had arrived for Prince William to witness his father's transformation from heir to king, marking the beginning of a new chapter in British royal history. Westminster Abbey had never looked more magnificent than it did that morning. Centuries of royal history seemed to pulse through the ancient stones as Prince William walked through the nave, taking his place among the congregation that had gathered from across the globe. The sight before him was breathtaking. Thousands of guests in their finest attire, representatives from Commonwealth nations, world leaders, and members of extended royal families from across Europe. But William's attention was drawn to one particular section of the Abbey, where an empty chair sat prominently among the royal family seating. The chair that should have held his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. The absence hit him like a physical blow, even though he had prepared himself for this moment. She had been the constant in British life for 70 years, and her absence from this historic day felt like a missing piece of the nation's heart. He glanced at his father, who was making his way slowly down the aisle, and saw the same recognition in Charles's eyes. The new king's gaze lingered on that empty chair for just a moment longer than necessary, and William understood that his father was feeling the weight of stepping into shoes that had seemed impossible to fill. The ceremony began with ancient words that had been spoken for kings and queens for nearly 1,000 years. William watched as his father participated in rituals that connected him to every monarch who had come before. The Archbishop of Canterbury's voice rang through the Abbey, carrying promises and commitments that would bind Charles to his people for the remainder of his life. Young Prince George sat perfectly still in his page uniform, his eyes wide as he watched his grandfather participate in traditions that would one day be his own responsibility. William felt a surge of pride watching his eldest son handle the gravity of the moment with such maturity. At just 10 years old, George was already showing signs of the composure that royal life would demand of him. Princess Charlotte whispered something to her younger brother Louis, who had been remarkably well-behaved for a 5-year-old sitting through such a lengthy ceremony. Catherine caught William's eye and smiled, both parents sharing a moment of satisfaction at how beautifully their children were representing the family on this historic day. The moment everyone had waited for arrived as the Archbishop lifted the St. Edward's crown, the same crown that had been used in coronations for centuries. The abbey fell into complete silence, a hush so profound that William could hear his own heartbeat. This was the instant when his father would officially become King Charles III, when the reign of Elizabeth II would formally pass to the next generation. As the crown was placed on his father's head, William felt tears begin to form in his eyes. The emotion came suddenly and powerfully, catching him completely off guard. Here was his father, who had waited longer than any heir in British history, finally receiving the recognition and responsibility that had been his destiny since the moment of his birth. But the tears weren't just about his father's achievement. They were about his grandmother's absence, about the end of an era that had defined British life for generations. They were about the enormous responsibility that now fell to his father's shoulders, and the knowledge that one day those same shoulders would carry the weight of the crown. William's mind flooded with memories of private family moments that the public never saw. His father reading bedtime stories with silly voices that made William and his brother Harry giggle uncontrollably. Charles teaching him to garden at Highgrove, patiently explaining how plants grew and why caring for the environment mattered so much. The long walks they had taken at Balmoral, where his father had shared his hopes and dreams for the monarchy's future. The congregation erupted in the traditional cry of, "God save the King!" and William's voice joined thousands of others in the ancient acclamation. But as he spoke those words, he realized he was not just acknowledging his father's new role. He was saying goodbye to the man who had been simply father and hello to the king who would now belong to the entire nation. Catherine reached over and gently touched his hand, having noticed the tears that William was trying so hard to control. Her touch grounded him, reminding him that while everything was changing, the love and support of his family remained constant. She had been his rock through every challenge royal life had presented, and her presence beside him made even this overwhelming moment manageable. The ceremony continued with the anointing, the investiture of the royal regalia, and the homage from senior members of the royal family. When it came time for William to pay homage to his father as the new king, he approached the throne with steps that felt both familiar and completely foreign. This was his father, the man who had taught him to ride a bicycle and comforted him through his mother's death. But he was also now his sovereign, the person to whom William owed his allegiance as both son and subject. Kneeling before the throne, William placed his hands between his father's hands and spoke the words of homage that had been used for centuries. "I, William, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb and of earthly worship, and faith and truth I will bear unto you, to live and die against all manner of folk." The words carried more weight than William had anticipated. He was promising not just personal loyalty to his father, but accepting his own role in the continuation of the monarchy. As heir to the throne, his homage was particularly significant. It was a public acknowledgement that he understood his duty to support his father's reign and to prepare himself for his own eventual coronation. When their eyes met during the homage, William saw something in his father's expression that he had never seen before. It was gratitude, pride, and perhaps most surprisingly, a flicker of vulnerability. Charles was embarking on the greatest challenge of his life at an age when most people were enjoying retirement, and having his son's support clearly meant everything to him. The moment of homage concluded, William returned to his seat, but the emotional impact of what had just occurred continued to resonate within him. He had just participated in one of the most ancient and significant ceremonies in British culture, promising loyalty not just to his father, but to the institution of monarchy itself. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, William found himself thinking about his own future. One day, he would sit in that throne wearing that crown, accepting homage from his own son. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. He wondered if he would feel as ready as his father appeared to be, whether he would carry the responsibility with the same dignity and grace. The final prayers were offered, asking for God's blessing on the new king and his reign. William joined his voice with the congregation, praying not just for his father's success, but for the wisdom to support him effectively. As heir to the throne, William's role was about to change dramatically. He would become his father's closest advisor and most important supporter, helping to guide the monarchy through whatever challenges lay ahead. The recessional began, and King Charles III walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey for the first time as the crowned monarch. William watched his father's measured steps, noting the new confidence in his bearing, the way he held his head high under the weight of the crown. This was no longer the Prince of Wales who had waited decades for his moment. This was the king, ready to serve his people with all the dedication and passion he had shown throughout his long preparation for this role. The procession from Westminster Abbey to Buckingham Palace was unlike anything London had seen in generations. As Prince William stepped into the carriage that would carry the royal family back to the palace, he could hear the roar of the crowds that lined every street along the route. Hundreds of thousands of people had gathered from around the world to witness this historic moment, and their enthusiasm was infectious. Sitting across from his newly crowned father, William marveled at the transformation he witnessed. King Charles III looked somehow different now, as if the weight of the crown had settled naturally onto his shoulders after decades of preparation. There was a calmness about him that William had rarely seen before, a sense of finally stepping into the role he had been born to fulfill. The crowds pressed against the barriers, waving flags and cheering as the Golden State coach passed by. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, elderly couples stood with tears in their eyes, and people of every background united in celebration of their new monarch. William watched his father wave to the crowds with genuine warmth, and he could see how much this connection with the British people meant to him. "Look at them, William," Charles said quietly, gesturing toward the enthusiastic crowds. "This is what it's all about, not the ceremony, not the crown, but them. These are the people we serve." The emotion in his father's voice was unmistakable. After waiting 74 years for this moment, Charles understood better than anyone that kingship was about service, not privilege. William nodded, thinking about his own relationship with the British people. Over the years, he had worked to modernize the royal family's connection with the public, using his military service, his environmental advocacy, and his mental health initiatives to show that the monarchy could be both traditional and relevant to contemporary life. Watching his father's genuine interaction with the crowds, he felt proud of the example that was being set for his own future reign. Princess Charlotte pressed her face against the carriage window, waving enthusiastically at the children in the crowd who waved back at her. Her joy was contagious, and William found himself smiling at his daughter's natural connection with the people who had come to celebrate. Even at 8 years old, she seemed to understand that these moments were special, that the relationship between the royal family and the British people was built on mutual affection and respect. Prince George sat more formally, conscious of his role as third in line to the throne, but William could see the excitement in his son's eyes. The boy was processing everything he had witnessed, storing memories that would shape his understanding of what it meant to be royal. William remembered his own childhood experiences of royal ceremonies, how they had seemed magical and mysterious, and he hoped his children would carry positive memories of this day throughout their lives. The carriage journey gave William time to reflect on the private conversation he had shared with his father just days before the coronation. Charles had spoken about his hopes for his reign, his desire to be a unifying force for the nation, and his commitment to the values that his mother had embodied throughout her remarkable 70-year reign. "I know I can never replace her," Charles had said, referring to Queen Elizabeth II. "But I hope I can honor her legacy while also bringing my own perspective to the role. I want to be a king who brings people together, who addresses the challenges of our time while respecting the traditions that make us who we are." Those words echoed in William's mind now, as he watched his father acknowledge the crowds. The new king was already demonstrating the balance he had spoken about, maintaining the dignity and tradition of the monarchy while showing genuine warmth and accessibility to his people. As they approached Buckingham Palace, William could see the famous balcony where the royal family would soon appear before the largest crowd of all. The palace forecourt was packed with people who had waited for hours for this moment, and their excitement was palpable even from inside the carriage. The family gathered in the palace's private quarters before the balcony appearance, taking a moment to catch their breath after the intensity of the ceremony and procession. William found himself standing beside his father, looking at the man who had just become king. "I'm proud of you, Dad," he said simply, using the informal term of address that felt more appropriate in this private moment than the formal titles required in public. Charles turned to his eldest son, his eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you, William. That means more to me than you know. I'm going to need your support in the years ahead. This is bigger than any one person can handle alone." The acknowledgement of their partnership in the years to come felt significant to William. His role as heir to the throne was about to become more important and more demanding than ever before. Catherine joined them, having helped settle the children and ensure they were ready for the balcony appearance. "The crowds are incredible," she reported. "I've never seen anything like it. They're so happy, so proud." Her words reflected what they had all observed throughout the day, the genuine affection and respect the British people felt for their royal family. The moment arrived for the traditional balcony appearance, and the family stepped out onto the famous red-draped balcony that had been the setting for so many historic royal moments. The roar that greeted them was overwhelming. Hundreds of thousands of people filled the mall and the area in front of the palace, their cheers echoing off the surrounding buildings. King Charles III stepped forward, still wearing the imperial state crown, and waved to his people. The response was immediate and thunderous. These were his subjects now, and their enthusiasm for their new monarch was clear and unqualified. William watched his father's face and saw the exact moment when the full reality of his new position truly hit him. Standing beside his father on the balcony, William felt the weight of his own future pressing down on him. One day, he would stand in this exact spot, having just been crowned King William Viv, looking out at crowds who would be celebrating his own coronation. The thought was both inspiring and daunting. The children were delighted by the crowd's response, waving with the natural enthusiasm of youth. Prince Louis, now fully energized after sitting through the long ceremony, waved with both hands, bringing smiles to the faces of everyone watching. His innocent joy provided a perfect contrast to the gravity of the occasion, reminding everyone that the monarchy was ultimately about family, continuity, and the future. As the family retreated from the balcony, William caught his father's arm gently. "How do you feel?" he asked. It was a simple question, but William needed to know how his father was processing this enormous change in his life. Charles paused, considering the question carefully. honored," he said finally. "Humbled. Ready." He looked at his son with an expression of deep gratitude. "And grateful to have you beside me for whatever comes next." The rest of the day passed in a blur of private celebrations, family photographs, and quiet moments of reflection. As evening fell over London, William stood at a palace window, looking out at the crowds that were still celebrating in the streets below. The coronation had been a success beyond anyone's expectations, and his father had begun his reign with the full support and enthusiasm of the British people. That night, as he tucked his children into bed, William found himself thinking about the legacy that had been passed down to his father, and that would one day be passed down to him. Prince George asked him about the crown, wondering if it was heavy to wear. "Very heavy," William replied, thinking not just about the physical weight of the gold and jewels, but about the enormous responsibility that came with it. "Will I have to wear it someday, Papa?" George asked, with the curiosity of a child who was just beginning to understand his destiny. "Someday, yes," William answered honestly. "But not for a very long time. And when that day comes, you'll be ready, just like Grandpa King Charles was ready today." As William prepared for sleep that night, he reflected on the day that had changed his family forever. His father was now king. He was officially the heir to the throne, and his children had taken their first real steps into understanding their royal roles. The coronation had been a celebration of tradition, but it had also been a glimpse into the future of the British monarchy. The unexpected moment that had left millions in tears was not any single gesture or ceremony, but the profound realization that they had witnessed the peaceful transfer of the crown from one generation to the next, the continuation of a tradition that had shaped British identity for over 1,000 years. In an age of rapid change and uncertainty, the coronation had provided a sense of stability, continuity, and shared national purpose that transcended political differences and united the country in celebration of their history and hope for their future.